here at the association. Thank you for joining us today to discuss this important issue of redistricting. There will be some time at the end of the presentation for questions. And with that, I will introduce our guest today. Commissioner MC Rothorn is the Vice Chair of the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission and also a Lansing native. So welcome, MC. We're glad to have you here, and I'll let you begin your presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think the realtors are building a new, I think it's a headquarters. Does that sound right?
The state Michigan Realtor just built a new office downtown.
It was the state. Thank you. This is the Greater Lansing. Very good. Thanks for helping me distinguish those two. So yes, so I am a Lansing native. I'm born and raised in Ann Arbor, but I went to Michigan State and stayed in Lansing, met my spouse. And so I'm been in Lansing for well over 20 years. And proud to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And my name is Commissioner MC Rothorn, as was said. And so I'm gonna give you a sense now of the other 13. I am one of 13. These are the 13 of us. And we do comprise the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. We're all randomly selected Michigan residents, and 4 of us affiliate as Democrat, 5 affiliate as independent or non-affiliated, and 4 affiliate as Republicans. And we were randomly selected through a lottery run by the Michigan Department of State. So in Michigan's new redistricting process, as you all know, I think this is new, right? The legislature was doing this before 2018 when we approved it, but Michigan's new redistricting process, we, the MICRC, have the exclusive authority in drawing the maps for Michigan's congressional, House, and Senate districts. So one of the reasons I like to point out is, right, we were randomly selected because there is no body that selected us, right? There is no supervisory body. We supervise ourselves. We are a legislative body. So we have the exclusive authority in drawing the maps for Michigan's congressional, House, and Senate districts. And it's in Michigan's Constitution. It's Article 4, Section 6, if you want to learn more.
MC, I have a question, actually.
Yeah, please.
You said that you guys were randomly selected. Was that like from voter registrations in the state, and that you guys were selected from that?
No, there was an application process that was, the Secretary of State, Michigan Secretary of State, is the official secretary to the commission, right? So what happened after 2018, when the voters approved this new process, the secretary was tasked with translating what the constitutional language is, right? They were tasked with translating how to make this constitutional language become an actual body, right? Become real. And so what they did was they created an application, essentially, that was mailed. I received mine in the mail. Some of my fellow commissioners received it through the mail, but then actually got an email also. There was a notary that was required if you did send the application in by mail. And one person actually had to get there because of COVID at the time, get it notarized over Zoom. So there was an application process, and it did arrive in different ways. And there were about 9,000 people, almost 10,000, who applied. But again, there was no sort of criteria that would qualify or disqualify you, right? It was a random selection, but there was an application. It was not the voter registration.
Gotcha, just curious. Thank you. And I'm sorry if you stated that and I was just confused.
No, please ask the question. No, that's exactly right. I appreciate the questions. And so, yeah, if any of you have questions, I cannot see the chat. I have 2 screens here, but I can only really see what I'm reading with my notes and the screen. So please, speak up, and I appreciate the question. Thank you, Amanda. So at this point, what I'm going to do is try to illustrate one of the videos that we've created to demonstrate one of the core values that we do have, which is transparency, right? The voter in the constitutional language says there will be fair maps using a transparent process. So this video helps understand that.
We represent the citizens of Michigan.
We represent fairness.
We represent transparency.
We do not represent any political party.
We represent diversity.
We are the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission.
We want to hear from you because your voice matters.
Our mission is to lead Michigan's redistricting process to assure Michigan's congressional, state Senate, and state House district lines are drawn fairly in a citizen-led, transparent process meeting constitutional mandates. It is our vision to chart a positive course for elections based on fair maps for Michigan today and for the future. You have a seat at the table, and your voice matters. Visit michigan.gov/MICRC to make your voice heard.
And since I didn't hear any from anyone, I think you all could hear it and see it, correct?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amanda. So, yeah, so one of the things I'll highlight there is that we do not represent political parties. The word we've used is affiliate, right? Because we do recognize that the political process, and we are in a very divided Michigan. We recognize that people, as we in the application, what it says is, do you affiliate? But the Democratic, like for example, I affiliate with the Democratic Party. That's only because that's how I voted in the last 10 years of my life. But the idea that they have some hold over me, or that I represent them, or that I belong or pay dues to the Democratic Party is wrong. Therefore, we do not represent. So that's the clarity that I want to try to offer. And sometimes we get the question, what is redistricting, right? Every 10 years following the census, that's when it happens, right? District lines for the US Congressional, State House, and State Senate must be redrawn in states across our United States to accurately reflect their population. So the process of drawing these district lines is known as redistricting. And in Michigan, we have about 161 districts. I shouldn't say about, there are 161 districts that need to be redrawn for the 2022 election cycle, meaning these will take effect, I believe, in the first election, which is either February or March of next year, 2022. And for the first time in Michigan's history, residents have an opportunity to provide input on drawing the maps for this congressional, House, and Senate districts. Why should you care? So the openness, transparency, and public engagement principles that we are following based on the Constitution, that's part of the process we're doing. It is essential to it. And what we recognize is if you all don't become a part of it, right, this new process will not be as legitimate. So with your opportunity to ensure that your voice and your community's voice is heard, we need to essentially demonstrate to the politicians that have chosen the districts in the past that the people and the way that this citizen body is able to represent the people's interests, Michigan residents can, right, help influence that. We need to demonstrate that it's something that's important. And yeah, I'll move on to the next slide. We have with these districts, right, the process known as redistricting, we have about 775,000 people for each congressional district, and there's 13 of them. So 775,000 people in each of those congressional districts. And that is, right, we did have 14 last year when last census in 2010. So we have lost population. So each district will be larger in Michigan. For the Senate, we have the same number of districts, but there will be a little bit more people in them. There's about 265,000 people. And in the Michigan House, we have about 110. We have about 92,000 people in each of the 110 districts for the House. And again, those 13, 38, and 110 districts all add up to about 161. So to be clear, the commission is adopting one map each for Michigan's congressional, Michigan's Senate, and Michigan's House district. We're drawing 13 congressional districts, 38 Senate districts, and 110 House districts for a grand total of 161. And this is how we're going to do it. These are in ranked priority order. There are 7 redistricting criteria. As mandated by the US Constitution, the first criteria is equal population, and it refers to the amount of people in the district. We will also follow the Voting Rights Act, which is federal legislation that prohibits minority or minority language discrimination. So those are that's the first criteria. The second one being geographically contiguous, relatively self-explanatory. We can't have Isle Royale associated with Lansing in the same district, right? Then we get to number 3, which is the communities of interest. And those include cultural or historical characteristics or economic interests, such as art districts, neighborhoods, business, agricultural, education, waterfront communities, and so much more. So those first 3 are the criteria that we've been, again, in ranked order using to draw the maps. And then we get into 4, no disproportionate advantage to any political party. 5, no favor or disfavor to an incumbent, elected official, or a candidate. I'm going to back up to number 4, right? No disproportionate advantage. The way we have to use accepted measures of partisan fairness. And that is, we are going to be using 3 different measures. And I can get, if you have questions or specifics about that, that's how we're going to measure and get to the criteria that is number 4, that requires no disproportionate advantage to any political party. Number 5, we went through. Number 6, reflect consideration of county, city, and township boundaries. And then we're going to be, each district will be reasonably compact. And again, there's a compactness score. So there's ways that we are required to measure them, or let's say, cover our butts in terms of litigation. We did, before we drew any of these maps, before we started drawing, the MICRC did have 16 different public hearings. We were required by the Constitution to have 10. We chose to do more than 10. We had 16 across the state of Michigan. This is a couple pictures of what we did, or some of the people who attended these public hearings. And these are unique from our meetings. So we have meetings weekly, and we've been meeting 5 days a week. 4 to 5 days a week for the last month or so. But these public hearings were special, and they are required by the state of Michigan's Constitution. So at the 16 public hearings that we had before we drew any maps, before we had meetings to draw maps, more than 1,800 people attended, and more than 1,000 people offered in-person and remote public comments. It's still not too late for you to share your public comments. We have weekly meetings, as I said, and you can provide your comments in person, or sign up and provide your comments through Zoom or by phone at any MICRC meeting. And that's www.michigan.gov/MICRC. My goal here is really to help you all understand that this process is incredibly contingent on public input, right? The Constitution mandates public input. So we have to, as a commission, right, if we don't have public, right, so we're reaching out to make sure that we have public who understand enough and understand why it's important, right? So that we can actually create that idea that this is the new process. It will happen again in 10 years. And the more legitimacy that there is by people participating, the more likelihood that we're going to have a new process that people understand and feel like there's transparency and fair maps as a result. So in addition to the comments received from these public hearings, the commissioners also consider submissions from the public comment portal in drawing district maps for Michigan's Congress, House, and Senate districts. So as of August 31st, the MICRC received nearly 2,600 submissions through the public comment portal. This included more than 1,300 written comments, nearly 270 comments from Michigan's congressional districts, nearly 120 for Michigan Senate districts, and about 90 for Michigan's House. 100 on any partial redistricting plan, and about 130 comments through files from other programs, and close to 600 comments for communities of interest. This is to say, right, when you go to michigan.gov/MICRC, this public portal helps us organize all the ways that citizens can give us input, and it helps us organize it, keep it organized so that we can actually document it, right? Because it's something that we have to make sure that we can reference as we're drawing the maps, why we're drawing the maps this way. This public comment portal organizes our public comments so that we can, have an organized, approach to drawing the maps. And then it's you can see that there's more than one type of comment with about almost 2,600 total comments. Again, as of August 31st. So the process, as I mentioned, right, began with these public hearings, then now we're mapping, right? So we listened, now we're starting to draw lines, and we're using this public, like the comments that we received in the portal, comments that we received in the public hearings. And what we've done, right, in order to, before we started drawing that first line, we created 10 regions, right? And we're utilizing these 10 regions, right? These are not districts, to create the 161 districts. And we do cross over the regions to ensure compliance with redistricting criteria. And we will publish, we do, and we have published dates when regions are being considered so that the public knows, okay, they're mapping in the UP. I want to make sure that I'm present or that I'm watching it on that day, for example. And that's one of the reasons we broke up the regions. So now that this mapping process is engaged, right, we are engaged in the process at this moment, right? So we're drawing, we're looking at public comment, and we receive, you know, the feedback, I suppose, on how we're mapping still through that public comment portal. We will eventually have a draft proposed map, right, for each of those, right, for the Congress, for the state Senate and the state House. We will have proposed draft plans, and then we will have a second round of public hearings, right? And that will be to solicit public comment regarding the proposed draft plans. Again, this is required by the Michigan State Constitution, right? So we're going to solicit these public comments about the districts that we've drawn. Again, proposed draft districts. These are not finalized by any means, and they're not done. We're not just going out and it's not just a rubber stamp. So that's the first reason we're doing the second round of public hearings. The second reason we're doing it is to each proposed district plan will include census data, map, and legal description, right? So these are essentially every person that understands this will be able to see all the data that they need in order to make accurate and complete review of these draft proposed plans. And the Constitution requires 5, that we would do 5 public hearings. The Commission has elected to do more. Again, we're going to do 9 in the second round of public hearings. This is where we're going to be and when. And again, this is draft, but we're you know, we're on track, so to speak, to begin the second round of public hearings in Flint at the Dort Center on Monday, October 11th. We're going to be in Gaylord on the next day, on Tuesday, the 12th, and then we'll be up in Marquette on the 14th. That's the first week. The second week, we're going to start in Grand Rapids. Then we'll go to Kalamazoo, and then we'll finish up that week in Lansing on Thursday, October 21st. Again, that's the second round of public hearings. We're going to be at the Lansing Center on Thursday, October 21st. And then for the third and final week, we'll start off in Warren at Macomb Community College on October 25th. Then we'll go to Schoolcraft in Livonia, and we'll finish off in Detroit at the TCF Center on October 28th. So that will conclude then that second round of public hearings. And what will happen is we will then deliberate and shift and make sure that in order to, you know, make sure that the comments are reflected in the maps, we will go through a process that we're calling adopting the maps. So to ensure that these maps are, we want to make sure before we actually adopt it, that we're testing them, and that you know, all the changes that we've made after the public hearings, that they actually are still complete, and that they are tested to comply with all the federal and state legal standards. We're going to publish them, and when they're published, that means that there is 45 days for public comment. So again, one more time where the public can say, final review, right? They're not finalized, right? We're adopting them, and there's still 45 days for public comment, so that in that 45 days, if someone or other, you know, people sort of point out an egregious error or something that we did, there's still time for us to say, okay, these are not final. We'll come back and we'll shift them. So those 45 days are for public comment. And then at the end of those, right, there's a majority vote that is required, which includes 2 members from each of those people who affiliate with the Democrats, Republicans, and neither party, right, in order to adopt each map. So then once we publish the adopted maps and the supporting material, and the data, we have to do that all within 30 days, meaning the 45 days ends, right? We vote, and then we have to have that vote within 30 days after the 45-day comment period is ended. So at this point, what we're looking at, to give you a, our timeline, we're looking at, let's see, November 1st would be right after October 28th, we would adopt these maps, and then 45 days from, let's say, November 1st would be towards the end of the year, December 31st. And so we're looking at between December 31st and 30 days, before the end of January, we would essentially publish the adopted maps and the supporting material. And then in 60 days after we publish it, it becomes law. So that means we're looking at March, April before we actually have, let's say, law that that these maps that we've drafted and then adopt and then publish, they become law sometime March or April of 2022. Many people want to know how that, how does the courts often get involved? It will not start at a lower court. The Michigan Supreme Court has original jurisdiction. The court can review at its discretion any challenges to any maps adopted by the commission. It can then remand any plan that fails to comply with Michigan's law or the US constitutional law or superseding federal law, i.e. the Voting Rights Act. It can remand any plan back to the MICRC. But the MICRC is the only body that can create and adopt the maps for the Congress, House, and Senate districts. What that means is the court cannot draw the map. Again, there is no body that is higher or that has legal supervision over us. So we are truly independent, and therefore we really want y'all to show up, speak up. That's the hashtag here. We have email alerts, we have text alerts. We do know that there's a digital divide, and we want to recognize that mailing public comments, and we have received several. That's our address. We also recognize that phone calls can help people actually get their maps in the portal. And we have this 833U draw that allows someone at the other end of that phone line to help someone put their map in the portal. So there's a way to get digital representation, if you will, through the phone. And then, of course, we're on Facebook, all the social medias. We do have a YouTube channel. You can submit public comments directly at that www.michigan.gov/MICRC. And I think this is what you all have done already, right? This is a town hall. This is sort of a special presentation. So you know how to do that, to request one of those. And this is where I'm gonna turn it to questions and answers and appreciations, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
All right, thank you. I have some questions.
Please.
I guess the first question I have is kind of going back to the rules of, the population obviously makes sense. I feel like there's some gray area with I think it was number 4, the disproportionate advantage. We kind of experience that here when we get involved in different campaigns, as far as, some demographics for a House seat would only be one party. We don't even have a challenger from the opposite party. How can you talk about that? I mean, a little bit more in depth.
I can, and it has to do, so I think you were referring to a House seat. Yeah, it's the smallest number of people. So you're exactly right. There's 110 districts in the House, and it is easy to create sort of, let's say, districts where people can elect a candidate of choice, right? So it's right. It is harder to do that with the congressional, right? To have a 775,000 people reflect a candidate of choice. So back to partisan fairness, the idea that we are able to look at the House and try to draw, I'll say, purple districts. It is the 4th criteria, however, in terms of our ranked constitutional criteria. So if we focus on only drawing a House district, right, and balancing Democratic and Republican, let's say, votes, we're not complying with the Constitution, what the people have actually elected to do, right? The first thing is to look at, I guess I shouldn't say the first thing, but what supersedes that is the community of interest. So what we are doing at the moment is recognizing that there are communities of interest. So in the Lansing area, for example, there is a number of people from the Latin community, Latinx community, that have suggested that we look at the Tri-County area. I'll offer that. And there are, so we've looked at that as a number 3. We will, because we've drawn the Senate maps, and we do have again, we've drawn as a draft plan. And because we also have a draft congressional map right now, we will, with our, there's an expert who can help us understand the data, but it's at a statewide level to get it accurate, to do apples to apples comparisons. So we will look at that number 4 criteria within the next week or 2, but that's the best answer I can provide. We will look at it. There are 3 accepted measures of partisan fairness, including the efficiency gap. And there's another one called the mean median ratio. And I believe the other one, well, I can't remember the third one at the moment, but what I want to offer is that there are accepted measures of partisan fairness that we will get to help answer that, each district, what does it look like and how can we create as many purple districts as possible? But again, that is the 4th criterion. So we're not going to shift communities of interest. Yeah.
I can jump in with the 3rd, Commissioner Rothhorn, if you like.
Oh, thank you. Please do.
Yes, definitely. Good morning, everyone. I'm Julianne Paschal. I'm the general counsel for the commission. The 3rd measure of partisan fairness that the commission will be using is the lopsided margins. And as Commissioner Rothhorn indicated, those are all analyzed on a statewide basis. And what they measure is symmetry, whether the plans have symmetry. So the most straightforward way to explain that is, does the vote translate into seats, regardless of party affiliation? So if you win more votes, you should win more seats. If you win less votes, you should win less seats. And so that's how you speak of plans being symmetrical as it's related to partisan fairness. A lot of people advocate for, and have been advocating for, and will continue to advocate for, competitiveness, which is balancing out Republican and Democratic. And I only use those 2 examples as the 2 main political parties in the state of Michigan. Competitiveness is not a criteria in the Michigan Constitution. The thrust of the Michigan constitutional amendment was to take the partisanship out, to take the political considerations out, and to do all of those things. That's specifically why the 4th criteria relates to partisan fairness, which is the translation of the maps into the ability to, whoever wins the most votes will win the most seats. So that would be a critical distinction that I would offer, is that they're not attempting to balance. It's that the results using those 3 algorithms will demonstrate that whoever wins the most votes will in fact win the most seats. Otherwise, the maps are asymmetrical, which is a problem. So hopefully that helped. And I'll jump back out with my camera off. But again, thank you and good morning.
Thank you, General Counsel. That was helpful for me too. I appreciate that. I will offer, and many of you will know this already, but right, we are citizens, right? The 13 of us are randomly selected. We were just plucked out of our lives, just like you all. So yeah, none of us are professional map drawers, and certainly learning, we've had extensive training. So we definitely have benefited from that, but it feels like every day I learn a little bit more. So that was great. Thanks for the question.
That leads to my next question. Since this is the first time citizens have been drawing the maps, as a commissioner, what would you say was your biggest surprise about this process, and maybe also your biggest challenge?
So yeah, my greatest surprise, that I'm actually beginning to miss. We're coming to the end, and I'm beginning to, right, we have bonded. We have come to, yeah. So, and it's not over. We do expect a great amount of public input, and we expect people to try to divide us, right? We expect partisan interests, and we expect to be personally attacked, and we expect to be challenged, right? As a body. but I'm surprised that I'm ready for it, if that makes sense. I'm expecting it. I think many of us are. And I think that is going to be our challenge. And I do expect that to be forthcoming. We're in it, so to speak. We're finalizing some districts, and I say finalizing. What I mean to say is we're finalizing these draft plans, right? Right. There's such a process that I think you all recognize now, but it's so important that people feel often threatened or like feel unheard, right? We hear, but we can't pay attention, right? No one person can pay attention. It's like, yeah, drawing a district from the UP, just expecting one representative, a congressional representative to represent 775,000 people, but it is a massive area that they will cover, right? And for that one person, yeah, it's just, so I think that's going to be my answer. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can imagine. Right now we have a current state representative in Lansing who announced to run for state senate, as well as a former state representative that also announced to run earlier. And currently they'd be in the same Senate district, but the latest draft I've seen splits Lansing and East Lansing in that Senate district. So now I'm sure you're getting a lot of pressure because these candidates want to know, what advantage or disadvantage they're going to have come next year.
Sure. And the truth is we want to know that too, right? And we won't know until we get that partisan fairness measure and until we are able to run the analysis as our general counsel, Julianne Pestula.
One last question about that, and then I'll turn it over to other questions. You mentioned people divide in the bond that you guys made. I'm glad to hear that, because when you went over with what it will take to adopt these drafts, it required 2 of each party. Is there any speculation that there might be a gridlock in any of this that could even postpone it longer? Or
at this point, honestly, we're a pretty good team. So the likelihood of gridlock is very low. It is possible. Like, no one has a crystal ball, right? And I think that's one of those challenging questions. But at this point, I am hopeful and really optimistic.
Does anyone else happen to have any questions? Gary, go ahead.
Can you hear me, MC?
I can.
Okay. Hey, first, I'm a political junkie from way back, 35 years of partisan advocacy. So I realize most of the discussion regarding the redistricting has been about donkeys and elephants, and I don't want to engage in that. I'm not interested in that. I could never, of course, ever make it onto the commission because I had a political background, but I always had a thought, and this is my only opportunity because I'm not going to submit to a nameless, faceless portal. But this is a question I have for you, MC, and I think I know part of the answer, but in other states, one of the things I've seen, this is a real opportunity in redistricting. One of the things I think that's always weird is that the boundaries transcend House and Senate districts, willy-nilly, and meaning that what I'm getting at is I wonder if you've considered the concept of creating what I would call nesting Senate and House districts. For example, if we had 33 Senate districts and 99 House districts, right? If we did, because it's all about geographic apportionment and population, why wouldn't you take a Senate district, and inside that Senate district were 3 House districts, right? That fit, because then you create a legislative team of 3 reps and a senator representing a geographic area where the boundaries are known and understood, right? Again, all partisanship aside, that kind of nesting, wouldn't that, why isn't that a starting point for carving up the state logistically? I realize we have 38 and 110, right? And the constitutional amendment didn't change that. So it doesn't work, right? The numbers don't work, but what would it take if we're going to change the Constitution to make those numbers work and do that kind of nesting? Was that ever discussed?
It was discussed, Gary, and there were many I suppose, commissioners as well as public comment that was offered with what you're saying. So I know we discussed it, and I think you've answered it yourself, right? It is because we have this, the mathematics doesn't work, right? And right, there are also federal and requirements that we cannot, as a state, supersede, right? We can't create a #1 criteria to nest, right? It will always be after we have population and following the Voting Rights Act, and it will always be after we have contiguity, right? Nesting is not one of our 7 criteria. And what we were advised again through our experts was that it is mathematically like ridiculous, right? And you acknowledge that too. But I want to acknowledge too that our general counsel may have a thought too.
I'm going to follow that up now.
Well,
just tiny. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, as Commissioner Rothorn indicated, the public comment all has to go through the portal, and nesting is not a criteria. It can't, and the only method it could be a criteria is through another constitutional amendment.
Okay. I mean, despite whether it's a criteria or not, isn't it a strategy? Isn't it a process by which you could theoretically?
But Gary, what I mean is because the Constitution gives us the strategy, right? The people voted right in 2018 and said, these are the 7 ranked criteria. That is the strategy.
But that excludes then any other provision. You couldn't have said, by the way, we also want to try this nesting idea. That couldn't have been an additional criteria. You're restricted to only the 7?
Correct.
Okay. Then let me ask the second question, and that'll be it. Majority minority districts, right? When you look at the population shift in the state, right, you're seeing people leaving the urban core cities and moving out state. How can you continue to have the same number? How can we not reduce the number of majority minority districts when you have this dramatic population shift outside of the city of Detroit? I don't know how you can reconcile that.
So I'll jump in on this one, Commissioner Rothorn. I would direct the Commission's racial block voting experts memorandum is posted in the MICRC meeting notices and materials. Site, her PowerPoint is also there with all the tables that delineate the data that would go into that analysis. So all of that information is on the website.
And printed out in my binder right here too. But you can't see it because I have that silly screen on.
And I would also note the partisan fairness measures, and that memo is also on the website for your viewers. So that would be very helpful to everyone.
Do we have any other questions?
Nothing from our viewers on Facebook right now, Craig.
All right. Well, with that, then I really appreciate your time, Commissioner Rothorn, and best of luck finishing this process. And we look forward to seeing the final maps.
Me too. Thanks for inviting us, and yeah, take care. Have a great Friday.
You. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Thank you. See you at a meeting.
Thank you for joining us and for all your work.